Well, this is the, I mean, you bring up an interesting point. To what end is this conflict being waged? If you listen to Victoria Nuland, if you listen to Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan, and even people like Borrell and van der Leyen in Europe, it appears that this Ukrainian counteroffensive is designed to break the spirit of Russia, to drive Russia to accept a negotiated conclusion to this conflict that is to the advantage of Ukraine. So the idea is that they're putting all of their eggs in one basket, so to speak, this counteroffensive, the attack against Belgrade. It's not just to shape the battlefield militarily, but to shape it politically, to achieve a political result in Russia, to break the spirit of the Russian people and bring down the Russian government. Does this have any chance of success? Do you perceive any weakness on the part of Russia where, Ukrainian counteroffensive can compel Russia to agree to a negotiation of this conflict in ways that would require Russia, for instance, to give up Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia? Or is this just wishful thinking on the part of the Ukrainians and their Western supporters?
You know, on the other side of the front line, there is a legend, there is a myth, which is connected with the World War I, 1917, when the historical event, the Russian army reversed and went back to remove the authorities which had sent that. And there was a revolution, there was a civil war, so the war was a kind of a catalyst of the coup d'etat and regime change in 1917. Of course, that's what the Ukrainians, the leaders in Ukraine want, and the decision-making centers of the West, collective West, want, for such. It's not quite clear. There needs to be a panic, forcing people to go outside and to effect a coup d'etat. But it will not be the case. You have visited Russia, and you have seen the patriotic society of Russia. Of course, we do have our own people oriented at the West. From 1 to 2 million people have left Russia after the beginning of the special military operation. But Russia hasn't diminished, it hasn't weakened. From a perspective in our society, it's much cleaner. There is a kind of collective determination to win. And our victory is not over anything. The victory of Russia is to give an opportunity to the Russian-speaking people to live in their homeland and in good interaction with their neighbors. To be honest, I do remember 1990s, and I don't understand how European leaders could agree to be a weapon in the hands of the Washington. Let's be honest, they are not sovereign in their political decisions, and they transferred the agenda to the hands of the elite, which can be seen right now in the White House in Washington. I don't understand the interest of Washington, since Washington is a hegemon state and it wants to still dominate the world, and even Europe can be regarded as adverse in the economic field. So the war in Ukraine allows, kneeling down the European competitors and to bring great benefit from that. At the same time, the European leaders themselves need to explain to Washington that they have the right to say a word, and that we have to leave this crazy neighbor, a country full of weapons, a big outflow of people from Ukraine. There is a big criminalization in Ukraine. There is no rule of law. It is absolutely corrupted state where the rule of law doesn't operate, where absolutely different internal forces are in action, both by Zelenskyy and other internal actors. Ukraine is governed by oligarchs, the capitalists, who govern the internal political situation quite manually. And I would like to reiterate that in 9 months in 2024, the election is going to happen, the presidential election is going to happen. No, it's not going to be the case. They're not going to cancel the election. Washington will not allow Zelenskyy not to conduct the presidential election. Now we are going to have a new stage of pumping the Ukrainian with political mottos and different statements. We will see a big clash between the domestic political groups. I believe that even until the election, Zelenskyy cannot be the president anymore. It might be the way of how to hide Zelenskyy from retribution. So he can take his post till March, and then he will go to London and to the United States whenever he's accepted, actually. From my perspective, you cannot rule it out, because this election campaign is going to determine the balance of powers, and the strive for the victory by particular clans in Ukraine will put a strain and pressure on the governing elite of Zelenskyy.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because people talk about what is Russia's end game, what defines victory for Russia? And you've said victory is the defense of the Russian-speaking people. Vladimir Putin, when he spoke a few months ago, he didn't speak about a Russian offensive to capture Odessa. He didn't speak about a Russian offensive to capture Kharkov or to threaten Kiev. He spoke about creating the conditions for the economic and social well-being of the Russians that are in the territories that have been absorbed by Russia. So that appears to be the goal. There's a lot of people who say that this war can't end until Russia captures Odessa. But I don't hear the Russian government saying that. And what you've said is something very interesting, that, because we speak of, also the Russian government has spoken of denazification as a goal, how to get rid of the Zelenskyy regime. Is a Russian goal to create the conditions for democratic change in Ukraine, that Ukraine would cleanse itself through through a political process that would delegitimize Zelenskyy and put in place somebody who would be willing to live peacefully with Russia? Is this something that the Russian government is looking to? You're the first person I've heard who's in a position of authority and knowledge to bring up the March election as a critical event. Is this something that the West should be looking at, that this is a decision point, that the March election could be a key event that allows the transition of Ukraine away from war towards peace?
Yes, because the Ukrainian case is becoming very important and determining from the prospect for the election in the US. Next year we are going to see the election in the United States. So there are going to be a lot of questions about Ukraine to Biden, and quite severe questions if he runs for the president from the Democrats. Secondly, money. It's all about money, about the billion of pumping into Ukraine. It is a big headache not only in the West, it's a big headache for just regular citizens. I'm constantly reading European and American social networks on different political chats, and I see a very interesting trend. A year ago, around 80–90% of the users of the social network supported these financial aids, and it was clear where the money was invested in. It was not about the social support that was pumped into the military machine, war machine, but over the recent months I've been witnessing an absolutely different picture. So the shift